What's up, folks? Welcome back to the channel. Boozer here. Thanks for dropping in. Today's video, I want to help you guys build the perfect champion. So the way I want to do this is I want to make it as applicable to as many people as possible, just with some tips and strategies. I want to go over what I think you should do in terms of building out the different types of champions. There's different roles that each champion plays. I want you guys to be able to identify those roles within your team and roster and then build them accordingly. So another thing is I want to make sure that you guys have quality builds on your champions that can handle whatever content you want them to handle without the need to overly swap your gear around. So of course, this has big benefits. Obviously, you save a ton of silver. And that is the main reason why probably people don't have silver in this game, is basically swapping gear in and out. And I think that's one of the biggest silver sinks in this game. That is why Plarium doesn't really want to get rid of silver removal costs, because there's no real other consistent regular way of removing silver from the system. So if you're having trouble maintaining your silver, it's likely due to moving gear around too much, maybe leveling the wrong gear, maybe just not playing enough. That's a big one. Not playing enough means you just don't get enough silver. But anyways, let's jump right into it. I'm going to structure it in a way that I hope is helpful. But yeah, let me know in the comments below if there's any way I can improve it. I tried the best I could, but let's try and see how we go with it. Okay, so first things first, if you guys are not already using it, make sure you guys are using RSL Helper. RSL Helper will help you find gear if necessary. If your inventory is large enough, having this will help you find any gear pieces that you might be missing. The other thing you probably want to use is Hell Hades optimizer. So his optimizer will be able to help you basically generate whatever builds you have available to you. If you're a very early account and you don't have huge inventory, then the optimizer won't be able to give you that many good options. If you don't have that much gear leveled out, for example, then you're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way, which I would try to do it with you at this point. So that's how you're going to build your champions. Now I'm going to tell you guys, I want you guys to identify actually where you guys are in the game. So early, mid, late, end game. End game, you probably obviously know all of this stuff by hand, but what I want to focus on is the early and mid game players that maybe just need a little bit of direction on how to do this themselves. So basically, I would say if you're early game, you're probably still working towards Arbiter, Lydia, still working towards Brutal Clan Boss, still working towards even Nightmare Campaign, for example. Maybe Dungeon 20s are still something that you probably are still working on. In the mid game, you're probably past Dungeon 20s. You're probably working on Lydia or Faction Wars. You're probably working on Doom Tower. You might even be in Ultra Nightmare already. And then in the late game, you're probably farming Ultra Nightmare, splashing in Hydra a little bit. Probably got maybe one hard Doom Tower under your belt. Maybe you can do some damage in normal Centranos. Pretty close to getting Lydia, I would say. Maybe on Ramontu. Somewhere around there for you guys. So once you guys identified which progress level you're at, I want you guys to pay attention to what I'm going to say right now. And that's basically a kind of like a visual guide on how I think you guys should prioritize your gear on your champions. So that's a big way of basically putting the best build on the champion for your current progress level. It's very important. This will save you guys from basically swapping your gear in and out on, having or needing champions for different places, for example. But you want to make sure you have the best build for your progress level. So what I mean by that is basically if you're in the early game, the first thing you probably want to focus on is probably getting your... There's multiple places that you need to get focused on, right? But obviously you're not going to be focused too hard on like Doom Tower or Centranos. So you're not going to require your best gear on those champions. Your best gear is probably going to go on your dungeon champions, because you need your dungeon champions to grind dungeons for gear. And then you're probably going to use the same champions in your clan boss. So the clan boss requires the best gear as well. So these two are basically top priority for your top champions. Make sure you put your best gear, your best builds for these dungeons and to be able to handle these dungeons. What I mean, these areas, not just dungeons and clan boss. What I mean by that is, if, for example, you require 200 accuracy for a dungeon level, but you're trying to do Ultra Nightmare clan boss, you want to make sure that your champion now has 250 accuracy, because 250 accuracy will be useful in Ultra Nightmare clan boss, as opposed to being not useful with 200 accuracy. You see what I mean? This way you can have that one champion basically double duty in two different areas that are top priority for your account. Of course, in the early game, you're probably using the same champions for basically everything. But if you had a choice, your top gear, top builds will go into your dungeon and clan boss champions. After that, I would say faction wars and arena would come next. But faction wars would probably be secondary to arena, because progressing in arena is very important as well. You should be at least comfortable slowly grinding your arena, at least building your great halls. Faction wars, of course, is very important, but outside of your main champions, you shouldn't be putting your best gear on secondary champions just to complete faction wars, because faction wars only occurs every couple days, so that gear, the best gear that you put on those secondary champions, will just be sitting idle on those champions. So keep that in mind. So arena comes in second and third, and I think this kind of template applies to most early mid-game players. In the late game, I would say once you have achieved Ultra Nightmare clan boss and you have Ultra Nightmare clan boss on farm, you can probably start stripping back some of the Ultra Nightmare gear so that you don't overkill the clan boss significantly. So clan boss would probably drop down pretty significantly, probably to like 3, and then you probably will put some better gear actually on your faction wars champions, maybe to complete for Lydia, maybe to farm Faction Wars 21, for example. So your priorities change as your account grows. So once you have completed the clan boss content, you basically just say, hey, I'm done with this. I can one key it or whatever. I'm happy with this. And then you start pulling back on some of the gearing on those champions, for example. For dungeons, until you can fully optimize your dungeons for the hardest difficulty, they probably will still get some of your best gear. After that, depending if you're into arena or not, you would prioritize arena as well. Personally, from an endgame player standpoint, arena gets my best gear, because my best builds will be more than required stats for any of this content, like dungeons, faction wars, bosses. For things like Doom Tower and Centranos, your Doom Tower team likely will be your best champions and have some really strong builds in them as well. So, because they are a daily thing, they would probably require some prioritization in terms of what champions you want to put on them and put your best gear on. Centranos, I think it's similar to Faction Wars, where you don't want to commit your best gear until you absolutely have to. And because it's a monthly thing and they change quite often, you're probably not going to commit super strong builds until you have to. So I'm going to leave Centranos out of it for now. But yeah, so I hope this just gives you a general idea of thinking of where you want to put your best builds on your champions. So I know there's a big long spiel about it, but let's jump into how to determine what roles your champions are. So there's basically 3 different roles in this game. You have DPS champion, so basically a champion that deals damage. You have a debuff champion, basically a champion that applies some kind of negative effect on the enemy. And then you have another champion that basically is some kind of survivor, protector type champion that requires survivability on them. So as a quick overview, for example, here's my Rotos. My Rotos does, damage. For example, here, my UDK, he has excessive effective HP stats. He's there to survive, to protect my team. Just an example. And then as a debuffer, for example, here's my Armans. He's here to apply his debuffs, be annoying, control the other enemy wave. So these are basically 3 different types of champions that I was just referring to. So as a general rule for all roles of champions, speed is incredibly important. Speed is probably still, it should be the best, most impactful stat in the game. So even if you have a champion that doesn't have very good gear on them, if they go fast and they're able to do whatever they need to do, they're going to be effective. So also, speed allows them to do what they're supposed to be doing or what you want them to do. So without proper speed, your champion basically never gets a turn and then never gets to do what he or she is supposed to be doing. So if you have a damage dealer, if they have no speed, they might not get a turn to deal damage. And that's what I'm trying to get at. And if you have, for example, a protection champion, your protection champion might not have enough speed to protect your team. Or if you have a debuffer, you don't have enough speed to control the enemy wave. So speed is going to be the king stat here. It's been said many times. Speed is very important. Taking turns in this game is very, very important. So I would recommend, if you're just starting out this game, if you're super early, still working through campaign or whatever, I would recommend 150 speed across your entire roster, whatever you have, at least 150 speed. That's a bare minimum. If you're under 150 speed in this game, something went really wrong, or you have a very specific build. Okay, and if you're in the early game with a very specific build, that's probably not going to work because you probably don't have enough options to make a very specific build. So I'll say that right now. Make sure you have at least 150 speed to start the game. That's pretty easy. All you have to do is basically get a speed boot. It doesn't have to be a 6-star. Like, this is the maximum speed boot, right? 45 plus 12 with the purple stars. But if you can get like a 4-star, 5-star speed boot to start the game, that's plus 40 speed, plus 40 speed for a 5-star, plus 35 for a 4-star, I believe. So if you add that to your base stat, you're going to get 140 speed roughly. And that's going to be enough to at least start doing stuff in the game, right? Because early on in the game, the enemies are pretty slow. So if you're going basically 3 turns for every 2 turns that they're taking, that means you're getting extra turn in, right? You're able to do more damage. You're able to heal yourself more. You're able to, control them easier, for example. And this is going to get easier as your gear improves. So big number one thing, make sure all your champions have speed unless you have a very specific reason not to give them speed. So up next let's start with damage dealers. So for damage dealers, you want to have actually let's gear a damage dealer. Okay, let's gear a damage dealer that we don't have. I have let's gear a damage dealer. Okay, so we have a damage dealer here. Let's gear him out. So first things first, like I was saying, if you're starting out the game, or actually even if you're into the late game, most of you guys would probably be starting off with speed boots, right? So start off with speed boots here. So first you want to go speed boots. He's a damage dealer, so you want to use damage sets. So if you don't have any damage sets for a damage dealer, then nothing you can really do, right? You just use the best gear that you have available. Obviously, giving him sets that increase your crit damage, increase your crit rate, ignore defense are all very good for damage dealers, but sometimes you just don't have the gear for it, for example, right? So for me, I'm just going to pick whatever piece. I don't need to give him any specific piece. I want to just pretend that I'm like an early game player here, okay? So let's give him this curse boot. Okay, I'm not going to equip it because that costs silver. I'm just going to get this curse boot. This curse boot has some damage stats, crit rate, crit damage. Not ideal, but it's okay. So now we can kind of like make a build this way, right? So you want them to deal damage. You want them to go fast. You want them to deal damage. In the early game, I'm recommending 150 speed. As you progress through the game, for example, for faction wars, if you're working through faction wars, you want 200 speed minimum. 200 speed for faction wars is a solid number. You'll be able to basically double turn some of the waves. It'll make things a lot easier for you. Once you start entering hard Doom Tower, higher levels of Hydra, Centranos, you're probably looking closer to 250 speed, and that's kind of where you want at least some of your faster champions to be, at least, if not all your champions, if possible. But that's kind of like the way. It's 150, 200, 250, and then for arena, sky's the limit. Make them as fast as you can possibly make them while they can still perform their roles. All right, so you want something like this. So you want a speed boot, you start there, and then usually for gloves, if you're starting off with gloves in the early game, you're probably looking at crit rate gloves, because the big thing is actually doing 100% crit. So you want 100% crit on your champion if possible. So I'm going to put, let's say I'm going to put this glove on, whatever. Okay, so we got 154 speed with some crit rate, some crit damage. And then after that, depending on what your champion is, if your champion is an attack-based champion, so you have to find out here. So like, for example, here, arrow says attack-based champion. You can double check his skills because not always is this correct. Not always is this correct. Okay, make sure you double check his skills. So it says attack. Make sure his attacks are based off of attack. Okay, so now you know that his artifacts, you want attack on his artifacts. That will boost up his power, his damage dealing ability. Okay, so like I said, let's jump back in here again. Let's put those pieces of gear back on him. Be quick and easy. Nope, we're not gonna do that. Quick and easy here. Okay, so notice how, I'm gonna move my head. Notice how I am searching for gear. And then we're gonna do crit rate gloves, try this on. So we can see here 82%. We want to hit 100% as much as possible. So we have 4 pieces left to go. We're assuming we don't have any good sets to put on him. Let's go. So we're going to do this. We're going to search for, let's go speed and crit rate, right? Let's go speed and crit rate. Let's cap off that, that crit rate. So for example, let's use, he's attack based. So for example, this chest is defense based, main stat. He won't get any damage off of this. He'll gain some survivability, but let's see what else we have in terms of options here. So this one would overcap us. You don't need to overcap. It's kind of good for like build flexibility, but you kind of want to get it on 100% or waste as little stats as possible, basically. This one's a pretty quick weapon. This one, we don't need to cap him on we don't need to cap him on one item, for example. If we can get some good substats, for example, this one has speed and crit damage. Let's try this one. So we put some speed and crit damage on him. We're still looking to crit cap him. This one gives us 11 crit rate. Okay, so this is what you don't want to do. You don't want to equip a piece and have 99% crit rate. You definitely don't want to do that. And then, you know, the reason why is because you have to waste another roll on another piece of gear just to get the extra 1%. Assuming that you have masteries and all that already set out, because you can, there's a mastery to add 5% crit rate, right? So I'm just going to try to find 12% crit rate if possible on one piece just to finish him off here. Okay, let's go 14%. Oh, this one loses too much speed. I don't really want to lose too much speed. What about, really? What about this one's 18? I guess close. There we go. We got 12 here. We got 12 in a cruel set. Sure, let's go with 12 in a cruel set. All right, so he's looking like something. He's looking like he can do something. He's got 100% crit rate, 211 crit damage, and then we still got 2 pieces left to go. So right now we can take off the crit rate. We don't need crit rate anymore. Now we want crit damage, and we probably want attack. So we want attack helm. We want a chest with attack. Sorry, we want a helm. So a helm here, good. And then since the chest gives us an option to have the attack percentage on the main stat, we're going to put the attack percentage on the main stat, leaving speed and crit damage as well. So let's see what we got here. Perfect. Perfect. No wasted rolls on crit rate or anything like that. We even got flat attack here. So boom. So there you go. I mean, this is not an early game build. It's more like a mid game build where you're trying to mix and match some pieces. But yeah, 200 speed nuker with 100% crit rate, crit damage, you know, some reasonable attack. He's going to do some work in the mid game for you. But this is kind of how you build a damage dealer, from kind of just like picking through gear. I know not everyone's going to have a full stash of gear that you're going to be able to sift through, but you're going to have to be able to do whatever you guys can do based on whatever account you guys have. Again, make sure you got to prioritize which champion gets your best gear. Gear those out first and then focus on the secondary champions, okay? So also make sure for masteries, if you guys don't really know what to do about masteries, make sure you guys go to tier 6 with your main champions, okay? If you have main champions that can benefit from tier 6 masteries, make sure you guys get those masteries for them. For most early game players, you guys are going War Master, so you guys get extra damage against bosses, extra damage against slime boss, for example, dungeon bosses. The main reason is because in the early game, your gear kind of sucks. Like, to be real, your gear kind of sucks. You kind of require this to help you deal damage, to kill certain things. Even waves, things like War Master. Giant Slayer is basically the multi-hit version of War Master. So if you have, my general thinking is that if you have an A1 that deals 3 or more hits, use Giant Slayer, otherwise use War Master. It's like it's like probably 80% of champions will use War Master, and then maybe 20% will use Giant Slayer. Certain champions benefit a lot from crit damage, so extra 20% crit damage could help. For example, somebody like Coldheart, which deals damage based on max HP, would benefit more from crit damage, for example. Yeah, so those offensive masteries really help your damage dealer deal lots of damage. If you guys need extra 5 crit rate, you guys can use this to finish off builds. There's going to be 10 crit damage here, which is also very good. And then usually you guys just take a variety of masteries that help you deal extra damage. So anything that helps you deal extra damage is kind of nice. If you guys need healing, Life Drink is okay. Whirlwind of Death. Some of these are less or more specific use cases. Shields, these are mostly like an arena mastery, so it's not something that you get too often. For like most PvE content, you're probably going to use this because you're probably going to attack first into enemy waves against the computer, because the computer waves are much slower than your champions, for example. But yeah, so that's damage here. That's DPS. Make sure you guys are stacking the proper stat. That's a big thing. Ray doesn't do a good job of explaining how to gear champions properly, how to deal damage in this game. If you guys want to figure out what is the best way of adding damage, whether it's through attack or crit damage, there's some math that goes into this. I'll show you guys the most basic math that I use. Okay, so here we go. So the most basic math that I'm going to use here, guys. There's obviously lots of things that go into this, like, masteries, gear sets, all that stuff. But this is the most basic attack and crit hit damage comparison that you can have. Let's say you have a build with 5,000 attack, okay? Let's say you have a build with 5,000 attack, and let's say you have 200 crit damage. So let's say you have 200 crit damage, 200% crit damage. So that multiply by 2, okay? It's supposed to be 2.00, but we'll just say 2. So you're dealing 10,000 damage, okay, guys? 10,000 damage. Let's say you have a new build that you want to try, but you don't know if it's going to deal more damage. So let's say it's 6,000. Let's say it's 6,000, okay? 6,000 attack. But your crit damage drops. So now your crit damage drops to 150%, okay? So let's go 151.50. 9,000 damage. Which build deals more damage, guys? The first one, 5,000 attack, 200 crit damage. Like I said, guys, this is a very basic general way of just having an eyeball of what's going on, but there's lots of different multipliers that go into figuring out which build will deal the highest damage overall after buffs and masteries and gear sets and all those abilities and stuff. But just something to keep in mind, right? All right, moving on. So after damage dealer, we have the other role, which is a debuffer. So debuffer generally requires accuracy to basically place the debuffs on the enemy. So depending on what level content you are on, you want to basically be geared properly to tackle that content. So I'm going to take Shiramani here. She is a debuffer. And what you want to do is basically find out what content you're doing. So if let's say you're in a mid game, you're doing dungeon 20. So for dungeon 20, you generally need about 200 accuracy to land your debuffs. So for Shiramani, she has a freeze ability here, right? So let's say you want to use her freeze ability to handle all dungeon 20s. Let's say you also use her in faction wars. Okay, so faction wars, you need roughly about 200 accuracy as well. So 200 accuracy is good for your dungeon 20s, is good for your faction wars. Okay, so all good. So that's the number that we want to hit. We don't use her in any other content. We want to use her only for those two areas. So we're aiming for about 200 accuracy. Okay, and since she is a debuffer, you kind of want her to go first. You kind of want her to go before your, for example, she could technically go first, right? She could technically go first, get her control out there, and then your team can do whatever. So you can make her as fast as possible, basically, with 200 accuracy if you want. If you want to conserve some of your speed gear, you can basically make her like the minimum. But since you're not using her in like Doom Tower or anything like that, you don't really need to think about overgearing her too much. If you just want to use her in dungeons, 200 speed is more than enough for any normal dungeon. 200 speed, again, is more than enough for normal faction wars. More is always better, but you want to aim for at least 200 speed on her. So 200 speed, 200 accuracy, that's what you're shooting for on her. Now, debuffers in general, they need to kind of survive as well, right? Obviously, you want to mix in some survivability skills. And since you're not saddled with needing crit rate, crit damage, you don't need to focus on her main stat to deal damage. Like, for example, here, she actually uses attack for her damage skills. You don't need to focus on attack. So instead of focusing on attack, maybe focus on survivability, so HP, defense to keep her alive. You could give her a healing set, for example, instead of like a damage set like Savage for damage dealers. So for debuffers, there's more kind of flexibility in how you want to build them. Generally, you want to give them more survivability, or they will have more survivability than DPS champions, just because of the stat requirement for DPS champions. So for Shiramani, great sets to build debuffers are speed, like speed sets, speed and accuracy sets, right? So speed sets are great. Accuracy sets are great. Perception set, one of the best sets in the game, guys. So make sure you guys have some of these pieces of gear, not particularly that one, but how about one with, here we go. How about one with speed and accuracy, right? Perfect. Speed and accuracy, you're looking for about, you want to try to hit the 200 accuracy, the 200 speed, and then all the rest should go into some kind of survivability. If you need her to go, maybe she has a really good A1. Shiramani doesn't necessarily have a very good A1. She has a control-ish A1, but it's a pretty low chance. But if you want her to go, you want to use her A1 more often, make her really fast. Make her as fast as you can. So you can definitely allocate more stats towards other things once you hit those 200 accuracy, 200 speed. You can give her more speed. You can make her more survivable. You can even add some kind of set to her, maybe like an immortal set, give her some healing, make her last longer. Regeneration set would be good. Just an example, right? Get you guys going. I would generally recommend that debuffers go before your damage dealers, maybe even before your protection champions, to be honest. So make them quick. In terms of masteries, if you want them to deal damage, if you use them, for example, in Clan Boss, you want them to have War Master, because, like I said, their builds won't have any damage. They don't deal any damage by themselves. Give them War Master so they can help out, pitch in some damage against the boss, right? And of course, every little bit helps in the beginning. Obviously, a multi-hit like Shiramani gets Giant Slayer, so she can deal a little bit more damage. And then you can pick between defense or support. If they're a debuffer, you can have Master Hexer, for example, and extend some of these debuffs. These don't get extended, but you can extend other debuffs, for example. You can have Laura Steel, gives you extra stats. You can also have extra accuracy here if you're struggling. For me, obviously, like I have a lot of extra stats because I have the Great Hall bonus. I have Faction Wars bonus. So there's a lot of extra places for me to get stats. So 200 is not very hard for me. But I understand in the beginning it's actually quite difficult. But if you do have a 2-piece perception set, that's going to make life a lot easier for you guys. So make sure you guys are doing Faction Wars consistently. Make sure you guys are crafting perception gear. It's one of the most important sets from early all the way to the end game. So definitely jump on that, guys. I got some decent pieces here on my account, of course. But yeah, so definitely something to consider for your debuffer. Like I said, you want them to go first, and especially guys, ones that land the decreased defense. So the decreased defense on the enemy wave makes your damage dealer hit much harder. Okay, so this champion needs to go before your damage dealer so that your damage dealer can actually do what they're supposed to do. All right, guys. So the last role that I had in mind was basically like a protector, survivability champion, or a champion with a specific kind of role or specialist for your team. So for example, in this category, I would think somebody like Sifi. Somebody like Sifi is kind of like protection, support. She has her own thing going on. So for her, she's a speed booster. She's a team buffer. She protects your team that way. She's a speed champion. She wants to go quick. She makes your team go quick. She empowers your team, makes your team better. All right. So for her, you have to capitalize on what she needs to do. So here, you want her to go fast. You want her to go fast. You want her to survive. She's not here to deal damage. She doesn't need damage stats. She doesn't need accuracy. She doesn't need to land any debuffs, right? She has a sleep debuff on her A1, but it is guaranteed. So therefore, she doesn't need any accuracy to land it, and none of her other moves require accuracy for any debuff, so she does not need accuracy. So where does all her stats go? All her stats go into speed, guys. All her stats go into speed and survivability. You want her to survive and go fast. So that's it. You're just building towards that, guys. Masteries will cater to that a little bit. So you see here, she's not here to do damage. I don't need her to deal damage against bosses, so she's not taking offense tree. She's taking full defense and support. Defense to keep her alive, support to make her go faster, make the team better. We go down to timely intervention, which speeds her up in the event that one of our teammates suffers critical damage or near critical damage, so that she can revive them. She's a reviver, so that she can revive them back up. So that's why these masteries make sense for her. Okay, so she's just one example of a kind of champion in this one role that I kind of thought about. So for example, another champion here that does require accuracy would be somebody like Mithrala. She's basically in this category of role. She is a debuffer as well. So you can think of her as a debuffer. So maybe she's not the best use case here. Maybe, okay, let's go, how about Arbor? Arbor is kind of the same as Sifi, where she wants to go fast. However, she does benefit a little bit from accuracy. You might even consider wanting to give her a little bit of accuracy so that she can tackle some content, because her A1 does give weaken, and then she has the strip ability here that requires some accuracy. But her main role is, again, to go fast. So you want to focus her stats into speed. You want to focus her other stats into some survivability. And then her third priority stat would be accuracy. So you see these type of champions, they do require some more thoughtfulness because they do require a little bit more stats. You also want to make sure that what you're gearing them in helps them achieve what they're supposed to be doing, if that makes sense. So for example, I'm going to take my Scylla the Drakes here. I haven't used her in a long time, but basically I was going through hard Doom Tower with her for a long time. But this build has been pretty good for her. So I want her to be fast. I want her to take turns, so she's in a relentless set. She's going quicker than most of the Doom Tower waves. She has enough accuracy to land her stun debuffs, for example. So she has AoE stun, she has decreased speed. And then I want her to be super tanky so that she can stay alive and then she can revive people, right? So here you can see she doesn't have like insane speed or anything, because she's not really like a speed booster like Sifi or Arbor, where you want them to be the first going. And not only do you want them to be the first going, but they need to go first, because that's how you kind of win, for example, arena matches. You don't want to go second with those type of champions for sure. And then I want her to have resistance so that she can basically resist some of the enemies' control against her, so that she always has the ability to decrease speed or stun them or revive, right? And then of course accuracy and stuff. But like I said, this build is more like a mid-game build. Like way back, I was using this when I was tackling hard Doom Tower. And then masteries, I have masteries catered to her here. Again, defense and support, because her main role is to support. Is basically support and not to deal damage. So just something to keep in mind for this this third role that I basically mentioned here. And for fun, let's build out this Lightsworn. So Lightsworn is I think it's a decent example of what I'm talking about. He's not like, he has some debuffs, but he's kind of here to protect your team, right? So he has some debuffs, which you like, of course, decrease attack and decrease speed. Very good, especially on a single target. boss, for example, but he's kind of here to, you know, control the enemy with his turn meter and then protect your team with the increased defense and revive on death. So for him, like in my mind, it's like, okay, I do want accuracy, but I'm not going to give him so much accuracy to exceed his content. So he is kind of a debuffer, but I want him to basically be fast and I want him to be super tanky. So that's kind of what I'm going for here. So let's build him out. So for example, fitting room, equip. So what do I want here? I want speed. I want accuracy. You know what? I want speed and HP basically. Speed, HP, maybe speed, HP, and defense. And then we'll go from there. So let's say I don't have it. Let's say I just have busted sets here. So what busted sets I want? Let's see. So for example here, yeah, perfect. Here we go. Use this one. Why not? Retaliation. Now we got a retaliation set on him. Why not, right? Let's see here. So what else can we do? How about here? Let's use this. Let's use no, we don't want to use that. That doesn't make sense. We have a glove. We have a glove. HP percentage glove. That might be asking a bit. Let's focus on HP percentage, just because HP percentage usually gives you a little bit more effective HP. So let's go accuracy set. Let's see if we can find a good corresponding piece. I think Eurogrims, sure. And then boots, we always focus on speed boots, guys. So we want them to go fast. Give them a little bit better. Sure, let's try this one. All right, guys. So I just basically put some random gear on him. He does have a banner on, so you can remove the banner. But basically, my stats do incorporate my Great Hall, obviously. So 80 accuracy, you just minus that. If I take away the banner, that's another 70 accuracy or so gone. So if I take away my Great Hall bonus and my banner, I'm sitting at about 200 accuracy. And then 220 speed with, it doesn't matter, crit rate, crit damage doesn't really matter. And then decent survivability, 50k HP with 4.5k defense. To me, it works perfectly fine for his role. You want him to be a little bit quick. You want him to be going ahead of your damage dealer, for example. You want him to basically increase defense. Let's say you have a defense-based damage dealer. You increase the defense. Now your defense-based damage dealer deals more damage. And then, of course, you want him to cycle back to his abilities quicker so you can get more buffs and get more of his A1 turn meter. And then, you know, more chances to basically survive. What if you need his revive on death to basically revive, protect yourself from the boss killing you, and then to stay alive? So getting him a little bit faster makes sense. So I'm just saying this is kind of how you want to approach how to build your champions. Like I said, you want to make sure that you have the main stat correct on them. Ideally, so he's a defense-based damage dealer. His stats are good. His moves are going to be based off of defense, but you're not going to be focused too much on defense for damage. You want to focus on defense for survivability. In general content, without increased defense, I would recommend somewhere around 3.5k defense for most champions. Obviously, damage dealers won't have that much defense, but I would aim for somewhere around there. You don't want to overshoot your defense. That's what I'm saying. If you're approaching 4k defense, let's say you're approaching 4k defense, most champions won't need 4k defense unless you're building like a stun target for a clan boss, for example, or it's a defense-based damage dealer. Then you're going to have more than 4k defense. Or you can be somebody like Valkyrie that benefits from defense because her A3 gives you a big shield. Just something like that. So for example, Valkyrie here, she benefits from having more defense. Of course, she deals more damage this way as well because she's defense based. But she also has a move that benefits off of defense. But yeah, so kind of the way you want to approach these things. All right, so hopefully I was able to kind of encompass the 3 different roles, maybe separate them, provide you guys with some ideas on how they differ. However, there are going to be some champions that kind of blend them together. For example, Miss Rider Daithy here. Miss Rider Daithy is a damage dealer for Sylvan Watchers. However, he does place the all valuable decreased defense. He does have a self-buffing increased accuracy, so you don't need full accuracy on him to make his decreased defense work. But you make sure you have to give some of these damage dealers, they might require some kind of accuracy for them to have some additional benefits. However, some damage dealers, you might not care for accuracy on them at all. So for example, here my Leorius, he does have some debuffs, for example, decreased defense, and he does have a weaken and true fear, but I opted not to give him any accuracy so that he can focus mainly on being a damage dealer. And then you have champions that are basically like a split. You want them to do damage, but you also want them to do their debuffs as well. So for example, my son Wukong here, he does damage, but he also has accuracy to do his abilities like stun, like cheap, like removing buffs and placing block buffs. So there are some champions that warrant having a little bit of accuracy so that they can still perform their debuffs, but you still want them to do their main role, which is to deal damage. So your main focus is on that. Another example is, for example, you want a champion like Sifi. You want a champion like Sifi to go as fast as possible. However, you also want them to be survivable. You don't want them to have no survivability. So you have to compromise a little bit there. Or if you're compromising a little bit on the speed, for example, for a set like Stone Skin will protect her for 1 turn, even if she gets outsped. Pretty good trade-off, right? So just something to keep in mind. I guess Arman's here would be a pretty good example because he's in Stone Skin. So I'm giving up some stats so that he can have 1 turn full protection from the Stone Skin. But yeah, you guys have to make sure you guys juggle your own champions based on your own accounts, of course. All right, guys, that's going to be it for the video. It's a bit of a long one. Hopefully I was able to relay my message across. Basically, focus on what level of progression you're on. Make sure you guys are aware of that so you guys don't need to rebuilding your champions all the time, because I think that's one of the biggest silver sinks in the game. Obviously, removing and re-gearing your gear. Make sure you guys understand the role and basically purpose of the champion that you're gearing. Make sure you put your best gear on your best champions in your most important areas. That's important. Okay, so make sure you guys do that. Hopefully I was able to show you guys some examples of basically some various champions and how you should approach them, what you should focus on them. Like I said, guys, speed boots on everything. That's going to give you a good start. 100% crit rate on your damage dealer. That's also going to be giving you a good start. Aim for 200 accuracy if you guys are heading into dungeon 20s. Obviously, you can scale that down if you guys are still progressing up to dungeon 20. Big takeaway is basically you need about 10 accuracy per dungeon level. So if you're on dungeon 10, 100 accuracy, for example. Clan boss, make sure you guys are keeping up with the clan boss in terms of stats. Make sure you guys are reaching whatever threshold you are for a clan boss in terms of overall stats. Just provide you guys with a quick clan boss snapshot here, graphic courtesy of hellhades.com's website. So make sure you guys are at least matching the clan boss in terms of speed, for example, and hitting the required accuracy checks for each stage of the clan boss. Easiest is on the left-hand side and Ultra Nightmare is on the far right side. Okay, guys? So make sure you guys pause the screen if you guys need a reference here. But yeah, anyways, guys, it's a lot of content. We can talk about this for many, many videos. Hopefully, you guys got something from this, and maybe I'll do something in the future for something more specific. Let me know in the comments below what you guys took away from this video, if it was helpful for you guys, if you guys need to see some more content on this in the future. You know, I fully understand, right? We've all been there, and I'm just showing you guys what worked for me, what my mentality was going through the game in terms of gearing and all that. So hopefully it was helpful for you guys. Again, let me know in the comments. Appreciate your time as always, and I'll see you guys in the next one.